Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, June 28th. This is the meeting of the Thurston Regional Housing Council. Our first all back together in one room regular meeting in quite some time thanks to COVID. So we're really excited to be here together today. And I'd like to start with welcome and introductions. And I think instead of by jurisdiction, we're just going to go around the table and we'll start with Annie and
I'm Annie Young. I'll give you a council.
Oh, everyone. Oh, Darian Lightfoot, Director of Housing and Homeless Response. Lisa Sparkman, Thurston County Public Health Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention, Communication Specialist.
Tom Webster, Thurston County Public Health and Social Services, Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention, Program Manager.
Leah Tangeman, Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention, Affordable Housing Program Assistant.
Romeo Chavez, Thurston County Manager. Rick Locke, Intern City Manager for City of Lacey.
Ryan Andrews, City of Lacey staff.
Jennifer Adams.
Art Gilman, Olympia alternate.
Michael Towser, Tumwater City Council.
who do we got on the screen? We start with Brian Hess.
Yes, I'm here.
From City of Yonge. Okay. And Jacinda?
Jacinda Stelches, City of Olympia, Affordable Housing Program Manager. The volume is coming a little bit low on our end. I'm on Zoom too, just to let y'all know.
Okay, thank you. So if everybody can speak up, that would be good. And Michael, would you like to introduce your city board?
Absolutely, I would. We are also joined online by Lisa Parks, our incoming city administrator. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. Well, I'm so glad you could be here today.
Thank you so much.
Brad?
And Brad Medard, the Planning Manager, City of Tumwater. Carolyn, I think you might need to be nearer to a microphone. We can barely hear you.
Okay, we'll check on that. Gary? Gary Cooper?
Gary Cooper, Planning and Building Manager, City of Yelm. I don't know if my video is working or not, but I can see you and I'm listening.
Great. All right. And Brad? Okay. Grace?
This is about the extent of.
Hello, Grace Lee, with the Thurston Affordable Housing Advisory Board. My day job right now is with Lacey Parks Day Camp, and we're coming back from a field trip.
Right. Did we miss anybody? Erica?
Hi there, Erica Smith, City of Tumwater.
Great. Thank you. Did we miss anybody else? Can you all hear me better now? And Tom, do you need to move?
I saw Brad shaking no.
Brad, and are you hearing me better now?
Yes, it's better than 2 seconds ago, but you may have to shout.
Maybe I should. Okay. We will
figure out the logistics of this room. And we're using the OWL because we thought we were told we had the static camera, so this allows people on Zoom to see the speaker. So we'll get it sorted out. Kind of like clockwork next meeting.
There's a little attachment that you can get to the L2 that is an additional microphone that you may consider. Because I think the only microphones within the OWL, right? So there's a little attachment microphone that you can get as well.
In 3 weeks, we're going to be replacing all the cameras.
There you go. Never mind what it just said.
Thank you. All right. And you're just in time. We are just finishing introductions, so.
Carolina Mejia, Cushing County Commissioners.
Great, welcome. If I could have a quick motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
I'll second.
All right. Any comments on the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting today's agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Well, I'd like to start today's meeting off with quite a celebratory note. Today, we have the first occupants of the Maple Court Enhanced Shelter moving in, which has been a long haul getting there, and no small part, and thanks due to the efforts of everyone sitting around this table. It took all of us to do this big, heavy lift. And so I think if we could just have a moment of applause. It's really good to get to this point. And I'd like to turn the floor over briefly to Rick Walk, who has an announcement about Maple Court that he'd like to share.
Yes, as Chair Cox has mentioned, the approval or final inspections and all certificate of occupancy was issued for Maple Court on Monday, and immediately we started doing the orientation and placement, I think, of 8 individuals today. I know representative from Olimap and King Conrad from the City of Olympia is this afternoon bringing them over and going through the orientation with the Lehigh staff to get everybody established into the facility. They'll be going up on the 4th floor of the shelter, and then as each floor is finished on rolling occupancy approval, then they'll be able to continue to place. And looking at placing, they're looking at placing 8 to 10 individuals a week. So it's a great milestone forward. And again, I want to thank everybody tied to the Regional Housing Council, all the jurisdictional staff, outreach, as well as the state commerce and DOT and State Patrol. One of the pieces of this is we're looking also to schedule and coordinate a ribbon cutting ceremony, which is going to occur. We started out looking at next Thursday, but it ended up being changed to next Wednesday, July 5th at 1 p.m. And we had to change the date because Governor Inslee will also be there at the ribbon cutting ceremony as well. So we'll be coordinating with Lehigh in terms of setting up the program, and I think we'd like to have the chair of the RHC to be one of the speakers, as well as the governor, and then we're going to be sending invites out, I believe, to about 80 individual or 80 entities, and those will, I think, be going out, become likely going out tomorrow. So I want to make sure everybody's aware, and everybody, of course, is invited. It's going to be, again, another big event, the step forward, not the last step. It's the first step in the series, and then building up to the work that Olympia is doing on Trans Anderson Road, and I think completed in August, correct?
My understanding, the site is completed as of in 2 weeks, the operational in August.
Operational, thank you. Yeah. So we're going to get this inventory on place and then able to provide services.
Oh. We've got Carolina logged in and in person. That's what the whispering was about.
Oh.
Sorry, I just saw my name up there.
Just a little confused.
Logged in here, so I was like, oh, someone's logged in.
Somebody impersonating you?
So anyways, hopefully everybody can make it on fairly short notice after the holiday weekend. We wanted to do it this next week because as we get people placed in there, it's going to get more of the residential type territory. We don't want to disrupt them or cause consternation. So we want to try to coordinate with Lehigh and Polymap and Kim's work with the City of Olympia to make sure that we can get it early so that as they get people established and into their rooms, that we aren't disrupting them. So,
Great.
leave anything out? Right.
What's the total unit count for that?
118 rooms.
Great.
So with the 50 on Franz Anderson, and just under 170 rooms coming online this summer, which I think will start making just that additional resources that are desperately needed. And the first phase, because we're going to continue to working towards second phase on Franz Anderson and bringing in other facilities as well. And the second phase of Unity Commons.
Well, we can't say it hasn't been a bumpy road, but it feels like we're really getting traction now as a housing council and things are starting to happen. So I hope our community is noticing this and hearing this, and I hope that it's going to make things a lot more pleasant for everybody soon.
I think also everybody can remember when we kind of started the RHC and the focus was trying to, for winter weather, look at property at Carpenter and Martin Way, and we're meeting kind of ad hoc, and it's evolved into a structure, and we're starting to get our feet under it. I think it's a fantastic accomplishment by the region, the partners, and all the people at the table.
I've worked with Rick a long time, and one of his favorite expressions is, you've got to start slow to move fast. And I think what we're seeing here today is probably proof of the pudding on that. So he does bring some wisdom. I'm really trying to embarrass you good here. You realize that, right? Okay, entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our June 14th meeting. Moved by Danny, seconded by Carolina. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, do we have any public comment?
There are no public comments, Chair Cox.
So no one registered.
No one registered.
Okay.
We have 3 attendees. Yeah. If anyone wants to make public comment of the attendees, could you raise your hand, please? All right, looks like no public comment.
Okay, thank you. All righty. So I'd like to turn the meeting now over to Jacinda and Tom about providing comments to the Department of Commerce on homeownership strategy and Southport Financial.
All right, I'll start off and I'm going to turn this over to Jacinda. So in your packet, at the last meeting, we talked about there was a request from Carly Colgan from Habitat for Humanity. Commerce put out a draft strategy for comment on their homeownership, and you asked staff to look at that and come with a proposal for possible comment. So there's a staff report in your packet and a draft letter. So I'm going to turn that over to Jacinda to talk through. And then there's a second issue around the Southport project that we also wanted to bring your attention. So Jacinda, all you.
Thank you, Tom, for the background. Again, Jacinda Stelchis with City of Olympia. So as Tom mentioned, within the packet is a draft letter to be sent to Department of Commerce. So a little further background, historically, Department of Commerce issues housing trust fund dollars for home ownership projects, and then they do a separate notice of funding availability for multifamily rental. So this letter is specific to the home ownership NOFA, and within that proposed 2023 to 2025 funding strategy or investment strategy, Commerce invited jurisdictions to submit public comment through June 30th. And the kind of 2 main issues that we are highlighting in this letter to Commerce or expressing feedback on are a 30%, or excuse me, let me back up and first let you all know that the total funding available or proposed to be available is about $38.8 million. So that's the amount that we're talking about. This would be a NOFA that would be coming out later this summer, fall kind of time frame. And then again, the issues that are of the most concern is that of that 38.8%, this funding strategy is proposing that 30% of that be dedicated to projects that are considered rural projects. That is a shift in policy than what we've seen in recent years, in which Department of Commerce has had more geographic pools. So with only establishing 30% toward rural projects, that essentially means that Thurston County is competing with other projects in more urban areas with more resources, such as King County, Seattle, Snohomish. So that is a concern. And then the other concern was Commerce is also proposing that 50% of the funding be directed to projects that are being developed by and for organizations. And it's not that, we disagree with that, but feel again that there are not any by and for organizations in Thurston County that are really ready and able to step into a development capacity role. And the preference is to see more of a transition period where that funding is directed, or some of the funding is directed to help build up by and for and grow their capacity before just launching such a large percentage of the funding in that direction. So again, support for by and for organizations, but realizing that with that 30% rural set aside and a 50% by and for set aside, and the assumption is that those probably won't overlap a whole lot. It definitely increases competition for the funding. And knowing, that we have projects in our pipeline that are looking to go after those funding sources, that funding source, excuse me. There is some concern there that we felt was appropriate, and you all directed staff as appropriate to express our feedback on that strategy. And I can't see the whole room, so if there are any questions before I move on to Southport, I'm happy to attempt to answer them.
Jacinda, just in case some of the people listening in may not be familiar with what a by and for organization is, can you give us a little definition there?
Yes, and probably other people in the room can expand on this as well. And Commerce has some kind of specifics what they're looking for, but essentially these are organizations that are led by the same individuals that serve their population. So a lot of the same things that we've been trying regionally with our advisory boards, layering in those with lived experience. Some BIPOC organizations are specifically serving BIPOC not constituents, individuals. And I'm sure, I'm not aware if Keely is there or, as well, but I'm sure Keely may have more to add.
Yeah, Keely is not on site. That's essentially right. So it's organizations that are led by folks who are serving a specific population for a population and kind of marginalized, disadvantaged or vulnerable communities. So that could be BIPOC, language-based, kind of seniors, those fleeing domestic violence. So kind of a range of, so Commerce has a very formal definition that I can't recite.
Thank you. Questions for Jacinda? Okay. Well, how do you all feel about the letter? I love your eyebrows.
It's good. I think the county's drafting this a little better.
Well, we did ours for the next item.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So the county has contributed, but this would add another layer onto it. So I guess just can we kind of have a consensus thumbs up to go forward with that? Okay.
And thanks Jacinda for working on this. We're doing some research in Olympia right now around homeownership opportunities. And I really hope that this can help influence Commerce's thinking on this funding.
Right. Okay. All right. Where are we? Jacinda, do you have more focus on that or?
So I do not have anything more on that issue, but if Chair Cox, if you all are ready, I can move on to the letter proposed to the Washington State Housing and Finance Commission. Do want to call out, I think in the agenda, it was labeled as to Commerce, and that it will be to the Finance Commission, not Department of Commerce, regarding South Point Financial's Lansdale project, Lansdale Point.
Gotcha. Tom, are you ready to move on to that?
Yep.
Okay, let's go.
All right. So with this letter in the packet, a little bit of background on this project and this issue. So earlier this year, the Regional Housing Council voted to award Southport Financial $1.325 million. And City of Olympia matched that as public leverage for the Lansdale Point project. So this is 162 affordable units off of Burr Street. So this project applied to the Washington State Housing Finance Commission 4% low-income housing tax credit bond program. And the thought was that that program would be competitive, but not super competitive. And we have officially entered an era where everything is just very competitive. So that finance opportunity was overprescribed. There was about $774 million in requests. And the Finance Commission awarded about $251 million in awards, and Southport was not one of those awards. So from here, this letter, Southport Financial reached out and requested that the Regional Housing Council draft a letter. The tech team feels that this is appropriate and could go a long way because in July, not quite sure exactly when in July, but there may be some 4% bond funding that is not used elsewhere in the state budget. And if that becomes available, then that could be that amount, unknown amount, could be directed to kind of dip into those projects that weren't funded, the below the line projects, one of those being Southport. Staff feels like there is a good opportunity that Southport may have a good chance of being funded if that does happen. The Finance Commission had a soft target of about 40% of funds that they wanted to direct toward what are referred to as balance of state projects. So projects that are not in King County, Seattle kind of an area. So this would meet a balance of state project. That soft goal of 40% wasn't quite met. I believe it was around 31 or 33% of funds were kind of slotted into projects that kind of met that balance of state criteria. And then additionally, another effort or target by the commission was to try to have a balance between projects that were publicly leveraged and not. And again, they have issued some communication around the projects that were funded and this opportunity for more bond funding to become available. That has essentially communicated that if more bond funding were to become available in July or sometime in this calendar year, that they would likely look toward funding balance of state projects and publicly leveraged projects. So again, Southport fits both of those criteria. So this letter is just communicating, again, that Regional Housing Council urges the Washington State Housing Finance Commission to consider again this project and its ability to meet those targets that the commission has set, and hopefully fund the project and not lose out on those 162 units.
Okay. Any idea what kind of time frame we're looking at before they would reconsider?
So the commission did communicate that in July, it sounds like in July, they will know if there's going to be more funding. But it was a very, it was a little bit ambiguous because they also said if other projects could fall out of the awards, essentially, if they don't get further financing in this year and they aren't able to be fully financed. So it was left very open in terms of the earliest July, but there could still be some hope later in the year if other projects don't materialize that are as of now funded.
Okay.
I just want to add that this ties back to the letter that we're submitting to Habitat, urging Commerce to better look at setting aside funding for specific counties. We can see that the 9 funded projects are, most of them are in the larger counties. And so when you do set aside that go to county specific, we have more of a fighting chance instead of having both of the projects at a Thurston County not be funded. And we're able to see how that was successful with the rapid capital acquisition, the Housing Authority able to purchase the Tumwater Inn after the second round of funding. So these two are really connected, showing that we do need just a better set aside for Thurston Mason, or however they just decide to parse it out so we can be more competitive with our projects.
Do you have anything you want to add? Okay, Michael, and then.
So if it's not ultimately awarded, we have 1.325 million to reprogram. Is there any expiration date on any of those funds from the various sources that we cobbled together on that we would need to worry about?
No, there was no specific fund source that was identified, although the local home fund dollars was the kind of the tentative pot of money that was identified, although that was not kind of formalized. So there's no immediate kind of deadline on the use of those funds from a legal kind of regulatory perspective.
The issue of the census tract expiring, is it possible that we would sit on our local commitment for next year's round of this funding if it doesn't happen now?
So
Yeah, go ahead, Jacinda.
I can answer a little bit of that. So just as kind of a first point and reminder, as Tom said, when the Thurston Affordable Housing Advisory Board just earlier this month put out the RFP that includes the home funds, local home funds, and 1406, and the other capital funding that didn't go out in February. So that 1.325 from Regional Housing Council was essentially pulled from that RFP, not made available. So, if, again, as Tom said, like there isn't a time limit on those funds. I have not had a conversation with Southport at this point to know if they would try again next year. And that next opportunity would be, so what makes this a little bit difficult is that next opportunity would be in March of 2024. So if this body decided for some reason that we wanted to somehow make that 1.325 available in the meantime and not kind of hold it for them if they do compete next year, our traditional RFP cycle happens in February, and then the awards are usually announced in May. So which was how Southport got to us in the first place, kind of through this untraditional method of coming directly to the Regional Housing Council, because the timeline didn't work for them. They couldn't wait until May of this year to submit an application because it was due in March. So just, if they do decide to come back and try again for that funding source next year, and we wanted to provide public leverage, the funding would essentially, they wouldn't be able to kind of go through our traditional process again and kind of compete per se, because of our timelines associated with our traditional RFP timing. So being able to kind of have that funding waiting for them, if we so choose, would probably be the best option. I also wanted to weigh in that when Southport did present to us and approached us, and the Regional Housing Council did award that 1.325, and there was a lot of conversation that they had been kind of trying to get the local leverage for a while, and a strong feeling at that point that if they weren't funded this year, that they may not try again. I don't know if that sentiment has changed or not, but typically, you know, without a strong commitment locally, and now some other things are playing into that as well, you know, kind of sends the commission the message that the project isn't supported. So there's a little bit of worry that, you know, if they do try next year, I don't know, I couldn't say for sure if they'd be interested or as competitive, I guess is what I'm getting. The other thing that I did want to share that I forgot to share, related to what Darian had mentioned, the Finance Commission also this 4% round, and they're anticipated to do the same with the 9% LIHTC that's coming this summer, fall. They also had an emphasis on buy-in for organizations, what they refer to as community-based organizations. So Southport didn't partner with a community-based organization. And just a takeaway, I guess, for our projects going forward, all of our projects, whether they're applying for Housing Trust Fund or applying for the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, there's most definitely a focus on public leverage and partnership in some way, whether that be the lead agency or a community-based organization, essentially some buy-in and work with buy-in for organizations. So going forward, you know, having those components in our projects will be really important.
Alrighty, questions? Okay. So what's the pleasure of the group? What are you comfortable pushing in this direction, or?
Yeah.
Right.
Do we need like an official vote on these letters?
I think we should, so that there's a record of it, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I move to approve the letter to Commerce and the letter to the Washington State Housing Finance Commission.
Okay, it's been moved by Danny, seconded by Carolina. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor of approving both letters, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. It's something we obviously want to stay on top of and be able to have some flexibility and adaptability going forward. So, alrighty. Anything else on this? You ready to move on to the work plan?
Yep, we're ready to move on.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right. So at our last May meeting, I think, we presented a framework for development of a work plan for the Regional Housing Council, an annual, and probably will be an 18-month, 16-month work plan, really for the remainder of 23 and into 24. So the technical team has been working on filling out what a potential work plan could be. And so in your packets is what the tech team has come up with, and we wanted to share with you tonight, but really have a discussion around what are your priorities, what would you like to focus on. So we have a lot of ideas in here. Obviously, not everything is going to be able to be worked on at the same time. And so really looking to kind of engage with you. And so this is a working document. We're not intending to say we've got this kind of nailed down 100%, but it's kind of where we're at, and really wanted to have that discussion. So the work plan is broken down into three broad areas. One is kind of individual projects. What are the projects we want to work on? what are the ongoing activities that the RHC needs to do, kind of the maintenance, the cyclical work, and then the parking lot, the kind of below the line, things we want to pay attention to, we don't want to forget about, but probably don't have time to focus on right now. So I'm just going to kind of walk through at a very high level. Really want to focus on the kind of the individual projects and get your input on those. So the first one is really the right-of-way initiative. That's taking a good amount of staff time. So it's not going to go on forever, but over the next year or two, that is something that we're working on. So continue to coordinate and track the row implementation. The next one would be to do a housing action plan review and crosswalk. So the jurisdictions have developed their housing action plan. So the thought would be to really do a crosswalk, see where there's commonality, and identify, are there, within those commonalities, are there things that the Regional Housing Council wants to elevate at this level? Are there ones that, as you know, one jurisdiction can take the lead on and bring to the Regional Housing Council? So the first task would really would be to do a crosswalk between all the housing action plans, and then identify what's the commonality and what the RHC is interested in bringing to this body. Next, we'll be looking at the Fair Housing Plan that Krista Lenson from City of Olympia took the lead in developing, that was recently approved and adopted by the county, City of Olympia, and the Housing Authority as part of our HUD Annual Action Plan. Lots of good tasks within that. So looking at that fair housing strategy and identifying their specific tasks that the RHC would like to focus on. The HART sweep coordination. So you may recall last fall, we brought to you a proposal to increase coordination between jurisdictions around encampment sweeps. Similar to the Cold and Hazardous Weather Task Force, this would be a task force with jurisdictions to coordinate around before and during and after an encampment sweep happens, you know, what that would look like. So increased coordination around that. And then really building off of the permanent supportive housing framework that this group passed, well, what was it, 18 months ago or so, and really developing a comprehensive affordable housing funding strategy. So this could look at, you know, coming up with a policy for off-cycle funding requests and taking a more holistic look at our overall funding strategy, especially now with the home fund as part of that. So those are some projects. In addition, looking at the RHC management structure, so kind of going back to that from the retreat, the idea of creating a more independent RHC was discussed. So we've worked on our governance structure, setting up the advisory boards. So now is it time to take a look at that longer term vision of the RHC? What's the thinking of this group in terms of whether and how to move that forward in next steps? So that's something that's on the table. Looking at a legislative agenda development for the RHC. Is that something that's to put forward to the states? And then finally, a communication plan development that Elise will be taking the lead on. So a hefty list of items there in terms of staff time. You'll see within that, we've put a really, really rough estimate of, you know, staff time and jurisdictions in terms of taking the lead on those items. That's very much a rough guesstimate at this point. A lot will depend on the nature of those specific activities. And then ongoing activities include just kind of support of the RHC meetings, the tech team meetings, a communication team, whether there's a communication team that's reestablished going forward, the support of the advisory boards structure. Also, we've got the management of the RHC funding cycles, the 5-year homeless response plan, and then we mentioned kind of really the permanent supportive housing framework, incorporating that into a larger affordable housing strategy, and then implementing the communications plan. And then kind of general external coordination is, you know, we're all, you know, supporting coordination with the Housing Action Team. We have the Lived Experience Housing Steering Committee, tracking legislation, tracking state and federal funding opportunities as well. And then we have a list of below the line projects that I will not walk through, but you can look at. they tend to be a little more focused. Some of these may fall out of the crosswalk of the housing action plans, looking at income restricted units and, manufactured home parks and things like that. So those are, a quick overview of some things that we've identified. So what we're really hoping is to have a discussion, get feedback from you on, of these items, what are the things that you would like to see rise to the top of the list? What are things that maybe 6 months from now we want to start focusing on? If we put all these on our list at the same time, they'll all kind of be moving forward very slowly over the next kind of 18 to 24 months. So just looking for your feedback and thoughts. So moving forward, yeah.
I'm wondering, I see on two items there, legislation tracking and then legislative agenda development. And I'm wondering with that, would it help to hire an external agency to help with that? We saw it kind of as more requests come along and more state funding becomes available. That way it's not, the whole responsibility is not on staff, but maybe on someone externally. Is that something that?
That isn't something we've talked about, but I think it's certainly something, if we can identify the funding to kind of hire that. And I don't know how we would connect. I know jurisdictions have their own legislative agendas and staff, what's the connection with the RHC, whether there's a way to kind of piggyback on what jurisdictions are already doing. So yeah, I would just say at this point, it's open-ended and we can look at all possibilities.
Just a kind of a question, just another option of media coordination. There's a lot of different regional groups, structures that create legislative agendas. You got TRPC that also does a legislative focus. There's a shared county shared legislative agenda, and all of them kind of have kind of specific focus areas, but also have broader circles that overlap. And maybe there's a way that we can also, there's not only jurisdictional efforts, but also into these other entities to kind of get more of a cohesive message regionally on all these different issues. Because one of the things too we want to avoid is one group having that we're all part of, two groups, we're all part of both groups, but then one's got a different focus that conflicts with another focus. And so that coordination piece is maybe something critical, and that may be something too, if we have somebody focused on it, that can help offset some of those issues.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of legislative agendas in the county. I think coordination needs to happen. I think going back to the initial point of Commissioner Mejia, I think there is an opportunity to highlight the Regional Housing Council. And the key elements of the Regional Housing Council is homelessness and affordable housing. And that is just in the face of everyone at the state. So here's an opportunity, I believe, to really develop a legislative agenda for the Regional Housing Council. It may not be effective the first year, but we continue to build that. And I think we need to build a presence at the state level of the Thurston County Regional Housing Council. Because what we see is King County already is on the news of the Regional Housing Council. And I think we need to build that presence. And this becomes an avenue.
We've had some conversations about staff structure, if this is to become a semi-independent agency eventually. And we had talked a little bit about a position that might have some of those functions tied to it. And are you all still thinking in that direction, staff? If we are.
For an independent organization in the future, I think there is some mechanical elements that we need to work through that. And at least from my point of view, the Board of County Commissioners has a legislative duty to be responsible for a lot of federal and state funding that comes along the way. And as for right now, I don't see a way they can delegate that authority to a third party.
Oh, not yet, but
what is
the
the change legislation that It's something we continue to explore that option.
Yeah.
Certainly. I think having a resource who understands the legislative process that can help us go through a legislative agenda at the Regional Housing Council. At some point.
I do think those are kind of two separate topics that they can eventually become one, but starting off with these two separate topics, I think in the draft work program, there is a mention of a review of the RHC structure and looking at Microsoft for that, and that's something too, depending on where the priorities of all these different things that need to get done, plus with the month-to-month management of the advisory boards and some of the funding cycles, kind of need to figure out what are those ongoing operational things that we need to make sure, and what capacity out of that do we have to do some of these other studies and efforts. And the RHC structure review would be one of those things at some point. If that's where the RHC wants to go, would be the place to have that discussion. And it looks like a good consultant or RFP process for that for assistance. I'm looking at Tom to shake out some cobwebs in my memory, but is there a thought about how much that would cost and about how that would be funded?
Yeah, so last fall when we were doing the structure, we kind of said, okay, maybe we hire, because there's some big questions that would need, so we haven't really delved into kind of trying to answer those questions or even identify what all those questions are, other than kind of as Ramiro highlighted. There's some fundamental questions that would really need to be kind of investigated and studied. And so whether we'd hire a consultant to help us think through and identify what those questions and possible answers are. We've not kind of scoped that out or kind of looked at what a budget would be. And so I think that's kind of this, I think this item is, is that something the RHC wants to move forward with, is thinking through and developing what that scope would be and dedicating resources to hire kind of a third party to help us look at that. I don't know what the cost would be, but it would not be insubstantial. It would be my guess.
It would be an effort.
To do that.
Okay. We probably don't want to jump the shark, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Shark. Yeah.
I don't think we can get too far into in this meeting, how we want to engage in the legislature, but I think we could put that on an upcoming agenda, something that gives us enough lead time for the next session. But one thing I'm thinking of is, we just wrote this letter to Commerce asking that they do funding a certain way. I'm wondering how much of that was actually written into the budget, and Commerce is responding to that. So it makes me think of areas that are of specific interest to the RHC, like how funding is distributed and stuff like that, and ways that we can be proactive. But I think if we put this on an upcoming agenda, that gives us enough lead time to, we can make the decision if we want to hire somebody who is a third party to help us, or if we want to find out what our key issues are and put together a one pager that each of the jurisdictions then can help promote. That's another possible thing. But one of the things when I look at this work plan that I don't see is when are the critical time periods that something has to get done by, to make sure, and how we balance the workload around that. And maybe that's a next iteration of this document is a chronological thing. And from there we could say, okay, we need to have a conversation by this month on how we want to approach legislative session. And an RFP, it needs to be out the door by this day, so it's got to be at this meeting this month. That's one of my comments on this. And I am so excited to see a work plan. This is so helpful to see what it is we're going to be diving into together. I have one question on RH structure review. This is the only one where for the hours, it just breaks it down by task instead of by jurisdiction. And I'm wondering if that was accidental or intentional, because we're not sure yet how those are going to break down.
Yeah, I think it was more, there's a lot of uncertainty around that in terms of how that would break down. And yeah, so kind of probably most of that would fall on county staff to do. But yeah, thinking, there's the whole development of the scope piece, and there certainly need to be conversations around that. And so and then issuing that RFP, and that's, kind of manageable. But then what comes out of that, and the whole, there's the whole piece, whatever the consultant produces, the questions, the discussion, that's a huge piece on the back end. So kind of, there's one piece that is just getting something out the door and I'm hiring somebody. But then it's a kind of a big black box about what that would look like, kind of whatever they come back with.
I would say 24 hours for the RFP, but only 8 to manage the consultants.
Just on kind of on a monthly, thinking about meetings. Yeah. So
Yeah.
as I said, this is really some kind of back of the envelope,
Yeah.
just kind of guesses at this point.
Right. Well, in the early days of the Regional Housing Council, this number 2, the Housing Action Plan review on the first page here, is kind of the work that we were starting, the path that we were starting to go down. And then kind of, because the homeless population was growing so rapidly, we just had to drop everything else and focus completely on trying to get people sheltered. And so I'm just kind of wondering from the group how much interest there is in and bandwidth there is to start accommodating some of these other policy-oriented things that, I mean, for example, I keep coming back to Tumwater for the great work you did on renter protection and Olympia as well, and with Lacey's work on accessory dwelling units and things that we can share and bring commonality to. Is that, without little stickies, I'm not quite sure how we give weight to these things, but go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of those are in the, what's it called, the second tier, the below the line projects, like
Right.
reserve manufactured home and tenant protections. And
Right.
stuff like that. And when I see the housing action plan in particular, and then the fair housing plan review and the RHC structure review,
Right.
those 3 things, when I look at those, I see those as kind of the foundation for all the next steps. Like, it seems like we need to establish those as a footing so that we can then move forward. Like, the reason why we were able to pass renter protections, manufactured home stuff, is because we first established the housing action plan that said, like, this is the vision, like, this is what we're trying to achieve. And then we've done all those other policies sort of piecemeal along the way to show, like, we established the vision, community, you supported it, this is how we're going to get there in terms of the actual substantive policy. So I think establishing and aligning housing action plans in particular across jurisdictions could be like enormous. Like, Olympia has much broader zoning stuff than we've done. Like, we've really tackled duplexes, but we haven't really talked about tris or quads yet because it's been sort of piecemeal. And the state kind of took care of some of that for us a little bit. But to a certain extent, like, until we are all kind of growing in the same direction, I think we can only be so effective at actually aligning those plans and then aligning policies that makes sense to be in terms of an order of operations.
I'll just add, when we developed the housing action plans, we did it cooperatively. The jurisdictions, Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater worked on those plans together. So it may not be such a huge effort to, we're projecting 16 hours a month and have it done by October. I think it's at least in staff's mind, it's a fairly reasonable task to accomplish in a short amount of time. That can then, give the RHC the ability to weigh in on what are those things that cross jurisdictional boundaries that we could start working on fairly quickly. A lot of those, you're right, are those kind of under the line kind of things, but we need to do the background work to get there and see where our commonalities kind of align. And I'm aware too, Yelm, and Gary, looks like Gary's got his hand up, is Yelm is either adopting or has adopted their plan, which has a lot of commonalities with our existing plans as well. So let's keep that in mind too. I think there's a lot of common themes that we can draw out all of our plans.
Right. Thanks. Gary?
Hey, yeah, just to follow up with what Ryan said, last night the council did adopt our housing action plan, and we based our housing action plan by first looking at the other housing action plans. So of course there is a lot of similarity. So I think that there is, a good possibility of being able to find traction on some things that'll really be regional.
Thank you.
I've got a question about this component here, because We can crosswalk our housing action plans. Some jurisdictions have done some work, others, have work that they want to do. Are we thinking that we would be kind of sharing what each of us has been working on so that others can, consider what is the best approach for them? Or is it more of a collaborative, like, oh, how do we align our policies in a more tactile approach in that way? I mean, it could be a mixture of both,
I
but
think it's a little bit of both.
that might be what we need to identify through crosswalking the housing action plans.
Right.
Okay.
We're also in the beginning phases of updating our entire comprehensive plan. I don't know if the other cities are.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, everybody is.
So like the timing on that seems fruitful to me now. To where it's,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
plan.
Right. Well, it just strikes me that, we all do such similar work, but we all come at it a little differently. And if we can, for things that we haven't, that we want to work on together, if we can identify processes and same path toward it, I think it'll work more smoothly in future, and this will help us kind of set the stage for future work. So I guess my vote would be for elevating the housing action plan review, and obviously the right-of-way work is ongoing. We already have that.
Yeah, and I think Michael's right that we need to do that before we figure out what the below the line projects are that move forward. And some of them might just be a presentation from one jurisdiction to the rest, but some of them might need a lot more hours. So
Right.
figuring out how to prioritize that.
Well, and I think some of this, what you're talking about, can actually be accomplished within our tech team. Is the sharing of information and stuff, and doesn't have to come out as a whole process here at this table, but for each to be aware and understand and hopefully collaborate more smoothly. Okay. How about, yeah.
Based on what I'm hearing, perhaps we need to add another column to this table. Maybe to start thinking about what's the desired outcome of each of those initiatives. Because Michael clearly verbalized what the outcome is.
Right.
So I think tracking in the work plan what is the desired outcome, I think will be helpful. And that will help us to measure success.
Okay. Good point. I don't want to dominate this. Please, Clark. Jennifer, everybody, join in.
I think for me, I think this is a good list of things that we have to work on, would like to work on, et cetera. And I think what would be really helpful, like I said before, is seeing it in calendar format, plugging in the things of because I see that it's here, in terms of the time frame for a lot of these things, but it's kind of hard to tell how what things have a specific drop dead deadline that we have to do by then, and what are things we can plug in as we have time. I would love it if we kept it to one meeting a month, and I'm nervous that we're going to bump it back up to 2 if we don't figure out the necessary deadlines and then plug in things around that.
Are you gonna do a follow-up? Because mine is different.
Oh, I was gonna call it, I think that'd be very helpful, because as, kind of the operational part of it, there's a lot of things that's gonna have a rhythm through the year, and it's gonna happen in certain quarters or months, and getting those paid in so we make sure that we can work towards those, and then know what the additional capacity to take these other projects. But I think what's really nice about having this work plan coming forward is it's gonna help both the Regional Housing Council as well as the tech team. So if new ideas or new things pop up, how does it fit in and what slides in that program? So it helps with that conversation as well.
Right.
Because in the past, we didn't have that. We're kind of bouncing around, and here's a opportunity that you don't want to miss, but yet for something else is delaying. It kind of helps with just being aware of those things with the Regional Housing Council. We both support the tech team, but the tech team can also better support the Housing Council's priorities.
Yeah, and just one follow-up on that, and then I'll be done. But looking at the communications plan development, it says here, need to clarify role and support from all jurisdictions, and we want to complete this in 2023. So Elisa, when would you need to come to the RHC and plug something into one of our meetings so that you get feedback from us in advance and then have time to cultivate create the plan. So it's how do we plug in those steps to get us to where we want to be.
I was going to say, in terms of emergency reaction, and right now the RHC has been very reactionary. I think we've been facing several emergencies and we've kind of had to readjust how we've been basically practicing to address whatever emergency comes up. However, just how things are going, I don't see the end to that right now. And so I'm wondering what's the flexibility on that, right? As emergencies pop up and, you know, staff capacity is already at a minimum, like how are we going to be able to address those emergencies and be able to get something in front of the Regional Housing Council in an appropriate time and manner where it's actually addressed?
I hate to keep looking at Tom.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer. I think, you know, we're building the staff capacity of our office. You know, I think the tech team is good. I think, you know, our funding cycle, we've just come out of a big funding cycle. We have a little bit of breathing room. This was a big funding year for us. Next year will be a much smaller funding year. So I think there is more opportunity going forward to be more forward thinking and proactive. Yes, emergencies are always going to come up. You can't always plan for those, but we know they're going to come up. But I do think we do have the ability now to kind of take a breath and be more forward thinking and intentional about some of these activities and scheduling them out. So
I think there's always going to have to be the need to respond to an emergency situation or an opportunity. That's what we had some opportunities this last, a year ago, where we had to put something together to put in place to seize on some funding that was coming available. So I think that's always going to have to be a part of it. What this will help is recognizing that those things may have to shift in order to reach out. So it knows what our workload is, so we know that we just can't, you know, do that and this. We're going to have to be patient with some of these other things to deal with those emergency situations that come up. Help us track that information.
Yeah, no, and I definitely understand, you know, the work plan and that setting on it. I just want to make sure that capacity is there. The right-of-way funding, for example, that was something that it popped up and staff had to come up with a plan. I believe it was, I'm looking at there, it was like a 1-week period where they were meeting all the time to try to come up with something and be able to submit something that was going to be viable, right? And so, and then we were in a 2-week setting, and that was just the constant of like, what are we going to do? This is, you know, what's going on. This is the next step. And so just with that and just making sure for me, I'm looking at it from a capacity basis to be sure that if something like that is to come up where the state says, we have this funding available, jump now, right? Are we going to be able to jump now, or is it going to be more of a burden to jump now and it's going to be a jump later kind of situation? And so for me, I'm looking at it from a capacity standpoint.
You know, we could rank all these things in here. Like there's the things we know we have to do, and then there are the things that we like to do. So we could put like, put something as red if it's something that has to get done by a certain time. Yellow is something that we should get done this year, but it's flexible. And then like, maybe green if it's something that like if we end up not having capacity for some reason, it gets bumped to the next year. And that, helps us, it kind of gives us a visual as emergencies come up. We can also do like a mid-year work plan review and kind of check in and see does something need to come off because something else came up, kind of a thing. So that flexibility is in there, and staff know where they have permission to ease up some time if other things come in and start dominating your time.
I'd kind of like to hear from staff on this and what I mean. I like what you're saying, Dan, that like some things are like going to take huge amounts of time, and other things will take a little bit amount of time. So,
yeah, I think that's really what we were hoping to kind of to start that conversation tonight. I think so. Hearing, talking about, hey, the legislative agenda, that's something we'd like to work on. That could maybe a more of a green But to kind of, to hear this discussion so we can take that next step with this plan and say, okay, here are the things, we know the funding cycle, that is time driven. We can put that in the calendar, we can see that. Other things, we can then start to rank. This is, we want to do in 2023, but we've got some flexibility in time. And then kind of what's going to say, you know what, this is one of those things that, yes, we want to do, but given everything else that's a priority, we're going to have to wait until 2024 to focus on this. Because, you know, and some of it's a matter of, you know, we can spend a lot of time on, you know, 2 or 3 activities and really kind of push them forward quickly, or we can spread our time across a wider range of activities, but they move forward more slowly. So some of it's to that, just, you know, there's 40 hours in a work week. You know, we can spend all our time on a couple of these items and really focus on them and hopefully move them forward quickly and then get to the next items. So anyway, there's, you know, just, I think this conversation is the start of taking that next step.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the flexibility. And I think it has to be on a case-by-case basis, depending on the opportunity of the emergency. And staff is going to bring those to the Regional Housing Council. And then the Regional Housing Council will have to see what it gets. Right? I think that's the collaborative approach of this group is. An emergency, let's say we had a work plan, the right-of-way opportunity came along, then the conversation on yourselves has to be, okay, what takes second seat? But another emergency may not be worth pursuing. So I think in a case-by-case basis, allow yourselves the flexibility. I think it's probably a good approach.
Yeah, my personal agenda throughout a work plan is to have direction from leadership in the RHC to say, like, here is a unified priority. You know, we can then address capacity issues to say, like with manufactured home parks, it's a big push for Olympia right now to do something very similar that Tumwater has done. And so we're going to try to glom on to what Tumwater has done, similar code, similar processes, and like build off what was there to help alleviate staff time and, you know, standardize throughout the region. So finding ways where all of RHC leadership aligns will help with capacity. It'll standardize the regional approach. So that's something that's really appealing to us, is to hear all of you say, here are our priorities, and then that would feel a directive to say, this is what needs to be prioritized at Tech Team, because we're going to have a regional policy or regional project, and we would like you all to work on it to standardize it. That would feel good, I think, to address both. And also with the simultaneous, like urgent need, like we're going to need another right-of-way project very soon. Like we know that this same, we're going to have people still living on the state-owned right-of-way, and they're going to do this same thing again. They're going to say, we have money, we need people off of the right-of-way. What's your project? And so we need to be talking about that, so it isn't so like make a decision now. Right. And we have some of those in the hopper again. So hearing all of you all say that here are our top priorities in this red zone would feel like directed to say we're not wasting time, or Olympia's just doing something and Tumwater and Lacey are going to do a different version, or vice versa, to help with capacity.
Right. Okay. Mike, do you said what you need to? Mike, do you have any wisdom? No wisdom? Lord.
Very ably representing our hopes. Just, I'll just give gratitude that, I mean, not only is the day of making a court opening, but we have done multiple, not just regional projects, but coordinating funding across all the jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
And then having a work plan before us today, it really feels like version 2.0. So I'm excited.
Me too. How about you guys?
Yeah, I think this is all great. And I think it's also comes back to, you know, how do you want us to spend our time? And so we want to make sure you're prepared. So you're expecting, hey, we're going to be coming to you about, you know, tenant protections, or we're going to be coming to you about manufactured home parks, or we're going to be talking to you about an affordable housing off-cycle funding strategy. So you know kind of what to expect, and you're like, why are we talking about this? Why aren't you bringing me, this issue over here? So we want to make sure staff is focused on, your priorities. So you're not only expecting, you're anticipating what we're going to bring forward, but we're also bringing forward the right issues to you in terms of what those priorities are. So, we just want to make sure we're prioritizing the things we're working on to be in alignment with, what you want to see.
Well, do you feel like you've got enough today, or do you want to focus this a little more?
I mean, I think we've got a little time just to kind of, I think what I heard was the housing action plan, the fair housing action plan are really kind of foundational pieces. And I think that makes complete sense to me of starting with those and looking at doing that crosswalk. We can then put in the calendar for the ongoing tasks. We can identify those. And then I think the tech team can start to go through and do a green, yellow, red kind of type of allocation. And then within that, we might want to come back and say, okay, here are your yellows. Let's talk in more detail about, are there priorities within this group? Did we get the green, yellow, reds right? And then within that, there may be some, finer prioritization conversations that would be helpful.
Right.
And you can use different colors if you want.
I particularly like lavender. Kidding. Okay, good. I just want to make sure that we're giving you all enough without being too prescriptive either.
We're okay with a little prescription.
Little prescription.
I was going to say that that's something that we've started doing at Olympia. I mean, you've seen our work plan that we develop at our annual retreat, and we, it is color coded for what is most important to get done. And we also say, okay, this one's going to take a lot of time. This one will take less time, but might have some legal resources need to be invested in it. So maybe that's something you can bring to a tech team meeting, just a show of visual of, what it might look like.
I guess the one thing where I would like a little more direction on kind of going forward or getting a sense is around the future RHC, kind of the long-term structure. What is that something that, you're eager to push forward? Is that something that's more of on the below the line at this point? So, it continues to be raised, but I'm not hearing a lot of urgency around it. So that's why, if there's urgency, then we would need to know that.
I can give my opinion. I'm happy that we are where we're at right now, right? But it's taken a couple of years of us stumbling and being reactionary again to get to this point. And I kind of just want to, enjoy being and actually being okay, we have a work plan set up. Let's work on that before focusing on the structure. I feel like we've been, again, so reactionary, and I believe the RHC structure is a great long-term plan. I think that's the direction that we should be heading in a couple of years. But I feel like we're still getting our sea legs at this point where we're actually just really finding the correct structure that we really need to work on, and how to be good partners and how to be better coordinated. I mean, we're just really getting there at this point where before it wasn't like that. And I feel like to just kind of flip it over and then start working on a new structure right now, I feel like it's just going to unbalance everything. And I'm afraid that we're just going to go back to not having a lot of coordination. So I would like us to, for my opinion, just kind of get our sea legs first, work on this amazing work plan that, staff, and maybe get a couple things done before we even start tackling the RHC structure.
Yeah, I can add on to it. I remember at the retreat, and there's some folks who maybe are new to what we're talking about, but there's been discussion in the past about the RHC becoming its own independent organization, like LOTS, like Joint Animal Services, stuff like that. And I remember Carolina, you were talking at the retreat when it came up, and we're like, so we'll do that in like 5 years, right? Because it's a big, heavy lift. And I think we're actually functioning pretty good right now. I think we've come a long way. And so I think, again, long-term vision, yes, let's keep talking about it, but I don't see us prioritizing it right away. You know, what's the problem we're trying to fix? Like, if we're working pretty well together right now, then let's revel in that.
I completely agree. I really do.
I think that thing for me is that when I think of formalized structure, I also think of increasing staff capacity to go alongside with that, and having, like, one of the things we've talked about when it comes to establishing a formal structure is having an FTE that is just dedicated to the RHC that just works on these projects, which then means that other staff capacity is then freed up to either supplement that or work on different things or whatever. So I think one of the things that makes me still excited about the structure conversation is that also then, I think, amplifies our impact, because we're probably able to have additional reach beyond, like in our case, our staff that work on this stuff have all sorts of other stuff that they work on too. Like Brad works on our habitat mitigation plan and has all sorts of different areas, and you know, we constantly feel stretched thin to the point where if there was additional staff capacity dedicated to the RHC, that would be so that's the other, I think, half of that coin that still makes me really interested in wanting to establish that at some point. But I think looking at the list of other projects, you know, I think that establishing the baseline that we all work from in terms of having plans that we all agree are like the right plans for our region, that kind of takes precedence over.
Okay. Jennifer, I don't want to pick on you, but you have the the vision of somebody who is new to this, but who has been involved in other organizations. And if you don't want to comment, that's fine. But if there is something that strikes you about this that you can offer a little input on, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to do so.
Well, thank you so much, Sharon. No, I don't have anything wonderful to add. And yes, I am new. I've been here 2 months now, I believe. But I would like to just comment to just say that the experience that I've had in other government settings have not been as thoughtful as what I see come out of this group, as well as, you know, what I'm experiencing so far from the City of Lacey. So very encouraged, really looking forward to continuing with this body of very intelligent, again, just very thoughtfully driven in your planning. So I'm just listening, taking it in, and very, very excited to be here. So looking forward to the time that I can contribute a little bit more to the conversation. It'll come. There will be a day I might show up and Brian might not be here.
She'll be telling us all what to do. For those who don't know, Jennifer is Lacey's new housing coordinator. So just a month or two into the job.
Yeah, a couple months. I was just going to add on that I think you're seeing it, you know, as a result of some of the work you're doing and the importance of that, of each of the jurisdictions taking, you know, a role in the housing, you know, programs of each jurisdiction. So, you know, Tumwater has added a little bit of staff. We've added staff. So there's, you know, I think that maybe has changed a little bit too since your initial retreat where you talked about some of these things. So we now have, you know, staff at each of the jurisdictions that their job is housing, which is good and is, you know, it's taking a little bit of that pressure off of everybody having to do the lift, especially in Tumwater and Lacey. And certainly speak for Lacey to, you know, take a little bit of the pressure off everybody doing everything all at one time. Which then we say help and we need help from, well, where can we get help? Well, maybe we need more staff with, you know, the RHC to help us out. So, you know, that, I think all that to say, I think at least in Lacey, I can really see that, you know, we're in a good spot right now. I'm a planner and a planner's got a plan. It'd be great if we had a plan for how the RHC could transition over time, long term, but I think we're in a good spot right now.
I kind of think that my position is a little bit of a test because it is specifically, even though I'm a county employee, I'm specifically the communication specialist for the RHC, and the stuff that I'm doing is specifically for the RHC and not for the county. Like the news release that went out today, that was as the RHC and not as the county. And so this is kind of a new thing that we're doing, and that'll be part of the communications plan in terms of building presence as the RHC, so people know the logo, know who this group is and what you do, and that I think will help kind of pave that way for that long-term plan.
We're going to talk about communications in a minute, and I
was doing some segue.
Perfect.
That was your update.
Absolutely perfect. But before we do, is there anything else we'd like to address on priorities before we move on to communications, which I think is a very big priority?
I just want to validate what Michael was saying, like, you know, in terms of like having this still be a good end goal. You know, we're operating well right now, but we also, you know, we're still like seeing, we got the wheels on the bus, we're seeing how the ride is. And once we, as you said, develop that baseline and a really well functioning machine, then we have a little bit more room in our system to start considering what comes next. And it might be, you know, maybe in a year and a half or something, we do another retreat and check in and see where we're at, or something like that. But keeping it there, but having the timeline be longer than some of the more pressing things.
Okay. We're ready to turn it over to Elisa?
I don't know if anyone on the Zoom has any.
Good question. Yeah. Anybody out there in Zoom land have a question or comment?
No, but thank you for the discussion. I think the primary purpose of the work plan from my perspective is just to ensure that we know exactly what we're going to be asked to do. And also that the RHC has the ability to establish priorities for our time. We definitely recognize that we're always going to have emergencies that don't appear in this list, and we just need to understand how that will fit in.
Thanks, Brad. Anybody else attending remotely want to jump in? Okay. The floor is yours, Elisa.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm going to just give a little communication update and what I've been working on. And so I've been working on announcements from the RHC, news releases, and informational materials, which you've started to see come out. So we've set a review process or development and review within the technical team, and a review and approval process with the chair and vice chair of the RHC. And as you saw earlier today, courtesy emails before something goes out, so everybody knows that it's about to go out. I'll either, you know, I always shoot for the day before, but that's not always possible, especially when it comes to news releases. So just whatever heads up I can give you, I will. So we've had the 2023 funding announcement go out last week, and the Maple Court news release today. And that also included an informational document about the Rights of Way initiative. And so I've also been kind of updating, working on the RHC website, which Leah, if you could share. And so there's just, I'll show a few things on the website that we've updated. So if you want to scroll down a bit. So just below the RHC members, I've added a updates section, so you can see the news releases there, the Rights of Way initiative document, and then I also have a link to the Maple Court website that City of Lacey has, which is great. And then I added kind of descriptions of the advisory boards below that, if you want to keep scrolling. And so those are there, and just below our meeting information are the announcements and news releases where they'll live permanently. And so I'm working on kind of just keeping this website updated and having all of the latest information. So if you want to show the Rights of Way document is in your packet, I believe your agenda packet, but here it is online. And so you can I have a bit.ly link as well that I can send out so that jurisdictions can share this information so that when people ask about rights of way, and then we can also update this, especially, and probably need to update the section on Maple Court pretty soon. And then we'll update the section on Franz Anderson as well. And then lastly, I'm working on the communications plan that I mentioned. So that's pretty much, oh, also, I guess I'll say that with these announcements and I'm doing social media posts on the Thurston County Public Health and Social Services social media, and I think I'm still kind of figuring out the best ways to communicate to the other social media managers at the other jurisdictions on whether they want to just share what we post, or I can also just share the raw material so that they can post it separately if they'd like. So working on kind of keeping the same announcement branding so that people can recognize when stuff is coming from the RHC and not, you know, from public health, even though it's coming from our social media channels. Any questions? Ready?
Great.
Very
So
good.
good.
It really is. And I really want to commend the county for making this communication position a priority. I think one of the things we've suffered from is the inability to really tell our story very well. I mean, I think we're still flying pretty much below the radar out in the community here. Not that many people are aware of the work and the progress we've made. So at least this will be an important role in helping to tell that. And I'm sure you would value ideas.
Yes, yeah. Love feedback. I am somebody who absolutely loves feedback. So please provide it. And if you get an email, especially that like courtesy email, and you think someone else should be on that, just respond and say, please add so-and-so. Like I just realized I don't think Rick was on the courtesy email and I should add Rick. But if you notice anybody's missing, just let me know.
Yeah. Cool. Any questions? Anybody?
Just a big sigh of relief. The web page.
Well, I didn't design it.
Well,
the whole county is. Yeah. I finally learned how to do it, so I'm taking advantage of that.
And can you back it out a little bit so people can see how to really access Regional Housing Council?
So if you go to Thurston County Public Health and Social Services, it's under the Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention is under the Social Services section. That's kind of the best way to kind of figure out where it is.
So home, elected offices.
Well, yeah, public health and social, and then social services.
I got a little bit of feedback. That photo of the tents, can we make that a photo of like the Maple Court or like, you know, like a picture of the solution?
Yeah, I gotta look at, figure out where we have photos living and maybe share some and then we can change that, yeah.
Well, it'd be nice to,
Good comment.
you know, get some pictures before people get too moved in.
Yeah.
To Maple Court. I don't want to be invasive, but
ribbon cutting photos.
I was just gonna say that maybe tomorrow for those of you, or excuse me, not tomorrow, next week, ribbon cutting might be a good photo opportunity. Yeah.
True. Although we don't want to have too much of a snore fest with grip and grin, cutting ribbon. Kind of
Action
pictures.
photos.
Action
Right.
photos.
Spoken as a media professional.
I'm sorry, but yeah, I was a journalist for years and years and years. Nobody but the people in the picture or the people who are promoting the people in the picture really cares about grip and grin. I'm sorry.
So there's some additional feedback, no grip and grin.
No grip and grin. Well, we probably have to have one obligatory one with the governor. But that would be good. But, yeah. So,
Only when you're pushing your legislative agenda.
Right.
what did you say, Tom?
No, I was just saying, linking to your legislative agenda, just make sure it's up when you submit the request to the governor for policy change.
Oh, yes, yeah.
There you go.
There's some strategy.
Yeah, definitely. All right, great. Well, I think that brings us to good of the order. Does anybody have any good to share? You share?
Yeah, I could share something. We worked on something in Olympia recently that was part of our housing action plan, which was addressing minimum parking requirements for residential housing. It was quite controversial in our community, as you can imagine. But where we landed was not requiring minimum parking for residential units within a half-mile of frequent transit. So that's every 4 times an hour, at least 12 hours a day, which pretty much gets us from the Capitol Mall area all the way down to Lacey on Martin Way Road. So a half a mile within that frequent transit. There's a couple other spots too. We already had an exemption for the downtown area for accessory dwelling units. And then in the rest of the city, requiring just 0.5 parking spaces per unit, which, people can always build more if they want, and a lot of people will choose to. But one thing that does is it, for one, supports alternative transportation options, but it allows a developer of any type of housing to look at what those transportation choices are and kind of gauge how much parking they should provide, knowing that they want people to come and live in their units. But it's no longer a requirement from us to do it. It's more just a decision based on what options are available and what they think they need to build. So it's a big thing.
Definitely.
Yeah, and at Tuesday at council, the purchase and sale agreement for Franz Anderson was signed by Franklin Housing Institute, Franz Anderson. So moving forward, and the purchase is in escrow now, along with the downtown homeowner mitigation site at Franklin and Olympia. A purchase and sale agreement was entered with PWG, another affordable housing developer, to develop housing in downtown for 30 to 50% AMI folks, primarily people with disabilities. So both permanent for housing units, both purchase and sale agreements signed at city council.
Great. Progress.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
So the next step will be an ILA for the participant jurisdictions to contribute with financial. Is that?
Yes, the Franz Anderson ILA is with our legal team now, so that'll be circulated to all of you for your yes. So many ILAs. Yeah.
Yeah, our favorite thing. Lacey, do you have anything to share?
I think so, not this point.
Okay. No? Okay. Well, here I thought we were going to be rolling past 6 and warning people that this meeting room is going to be needed soon. So I think we can clear out, safely adjourn. I guess I should ask if anybody online has any last minute comments before we bring down the gavel. Hearing none.
I guess, sorry.
Chair Cox, Jacinda Stelchis, City of Boston. Am I good?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Just wanted to let you all know the conversation about Southport. Southport has confirmed that they will try again for 4% this coming year, 2024, if they do not get bond funds that are opened up or awarded to them this year.
Good to know. Right. Thanks, Jacinda. Tom?
So I was just going to say for our July meeting, I know Commissioner Mejia, no one from the county will be able to attend. We'll keep it open whether we cancel our July meeting. We'll look at our agenda. So no decision at this point, but just want to kind of throw that out there. So based on if there's nothing pressing, since we may end up canceling our July meeting.
We have our full permission to do that.
Right.
There you go.
But for now, I'll keep it on your calendar.
But we're keeping it on our calendars.
Because unless we call a special meeting in July, we would be like
We go
2
until
months
August.
before
Yeah.
our next meeting, so that's a long time to go.
I'll keep it on my calendar.
Mother Hannah. Okay. All righty. Any objections to adjourning? Okay, we'll call it done. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
This
you.
has
Thank you.
been really great. I feel like I'm walking on sunshine today. Great.